welcome back. And we're here with another interview for the Becoming Witch series. And today we're talking with Bettina. Hello. You'll be able to find all her information in the information section of this video, where you can find her online. She has some obvious, one of them is a YouTube channel. You got to go check it out if you haven't checked it out already. So we're talking about transitions, periods of stagnation and transitions within witchcraft. So Bettina, why don't you start us off with telling us about how you first were introduced to witchcraft, how you found witchcraft. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I have to go back about 20 years.
Okay.
I was initially introduced to witchcraft just accidentally. My best friend of, how old am I? My best friend of like 20 plus years was raised as a witch. Her mother's a witch. So it just kind of happened where I would go over to her house for a play date because we were 10, and I'd be like, what are these interesting carvings you have here? Oh, those are runes. Tell me more, please. You know,
Yeah.
That's how it started when I was a tween. And then it gradually grew from there, because around the time I was 12, 13, 14, this would have been around the millennium, I noticed just in going out to the library, to the bookstore, those books started to become more accessible, more popular in general. So I'm learning bits and pieces from my witchy friend and her mom, and then also seeing these books at the store, and it kind of put two and two together, and I'm like, I'm all about this. So it started that way, just picking up little bits of information when I was like 12.
Well, that's neat that you actually had an individual or individuals that were practicing that you could actually like interact with, because I think that gives you a different experience than just reading about it. So I feel like you had the best of both worlds, and that's that's great. So in that, so then from the introduction to the studying, when did you identify as witch?
I took my time. I probably was in my late teens before I had determined that I knew this is what I wanted. It wasn't just a phase, because when you're like in middle school, everything's a phase when you're in middle school.
Right.
So I really took my time with it. I read the books that my friend's mom suggested I read. I kind of you have to unlearn, especially when you're a child, basically. You kind of have to unlearn the Hollywood tropes, the Hollywood fluff of what witchcraft is. Yes, those movies are wonderful to watch, but if you're 13 going into it thinking that that's kind of what it is, you're gonna have a bad time. So I spent most of my teenage years kind of unlearning and then relearning, and then determining, yes, this is exactly what my feelings are. This is exactly what my beliefs are. I was probably 18 or 19 before I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely a witch now. This is happening.
Yeah. So when you were reading, were you actually practicing with that friend and her mom or his mom?
Her mom, no. I don't think there was any active practice until the group of us were 18, 19 years old, when we would practice together. So for me, it was reading and maybe try this little incantation, or maybe write this little thing down and do that little spell. There wasn't anything of substance. It was mostly just practicing.
Right.
And then when we were 19, that's when we kind of got together. That's when I had the money on my own to buy my own supplies, buy my own books. I was more independent, so I think that helped as well.
Yeah.
That's when the practice really started.
So when you were first practicing, if I were to ask you to put a label on it, I know witchcraft is very eclectic, but I've had people say, they were a green witch when they first started, or they were a Wiccan when they first started. What would you categorize or label your witchcraft back then?
I think my friend's mom called us witchlings. we were never Wiccans. Like, I think the first book, let me see if I have it. No, I don't have it. The first book I ever read was Wiccan based, and I
Right.
would still say it's probably a good stepping stone. Not that Wicca is simplistic or anything, but it's just a good stepping stone into the world of witchcraft. So even though my first book was Wiccan, even though my first introduction was a god, goddess, and that sort of setup, it was never intended to remain that way.
Right.
So, and I feel like witchling, it's what's the word? Oh my god, the word. I can't think of the word. But it was very reassuring. It wasn't like, oh, they're just playing at witchcraft. No, they're witchlings. Like, they're in it.
Right. So what did your craft or your practice, what was the majority of what you did? You know, like, was it like, I don't know, or
Like
what is a typical day that you would have, or a typical thing you would have done?
Okay, so what we would have done was we would get together. There was four of us girls at this time in particular, and we would each have our assigned element that we would work with, and a typical ritual for us 19-year-old, when we were 19, we would call the quarters like you do. We would kind of practice. I have to go back like 14 years here. We would kind of practice working with the crystals. I know that there was like trying to feel what different energies feel like. It was really like, that scene in The Mists of Avalon towards the beginning where Morgaine is literally just learning what any of this is.
Yeah.
She's just watching Vivienne conjure the storm. She's just learning what the balance in nature is. That's kind of what it was. Like, how does this energy feel? Or is this a ghost, or is this another entity? It's like kind of learning the bare bones basics. I have had this dream. I have had this premonition, and I tell my friends, and we kind of dissect it and see what it might mean. It was just kind of that sort of practice. Nothing substantial. Like, we weren't trying to do any real, like, make this big thing happen in a ritual for several years.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, I think the group of you were really establishing a really good foundation for what's to come. I mean, feeling the energy, experiencing the elements. I mean, that's all basic stuff that you would hope a witchling would experience in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds like you guys started out really good. So, you practiced clearly with a little group there. Were you also doing things or studying on your own as well during that time?
Not really, like a little bit. So my personal practice would be like an hour in the afternoons. I might sit down with a book from the library and jot some of the important things down in my journal, or like that little notebook. And then eventually that notebook turned into the group tome. And I wish I had grabbed it before I sat down. It's in my office, but it's a massive leather tome. So we started just with like jotting notes, and I don't actually have my own book of shadows. It is a group book of shadows.
Right.
So I don't think, looking back, I ever intended to be the solitary witch. It was only meant to be the group of us working together.
So that's how it began. Yeah. So tell us or talk to us about the things that led up to the transition within your own practice, or within the group practice, however you do.
So my bed creaked. Oh my goodness. So over the last, 15 years, we went through transitions, not necessarily in how we were practicing. Like, our ideologies matured as we got older, but they didn't necessarily change. Our practice, like our aesthetic, the practice, like what we did and how it looked, that didn't necessarily change. The people were the ones that changed. So the four of us that were there when I was 19, a few years later, we had different people. And then a few years after that, different people again. So as we would grow, the friends would come and go.
Right.
So the only people that have been consistent since we were 19 are me and then two other girls. So it's always been the three of us, but every few years somebody comes in, somebody leaves, problems happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't had any changes in the last 10 years.
Oh, wow.
We've been very comfortable and very settled in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So the first 5-6 years was a hot mess. But we're pretty well established now. So the interesting thing is when I was going to talk to you about the transitions and the stagnation that happened, that is a more recent development, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Tell me what led up to the recent transition.
Interestingly, has nothing to do with the pandemic.
Okay.
So in the last few years, because the group of us used to live in the same town in the same immediate area, but as we got older, we got married, we moved. So now we're spread out over the entire state of Massachusetts. I have one of the girls is in Colorado now, so like we're all over the place. That caused things to need to adapt, but what actually caused this, not the stagnation, for me there's a little bit of a stagnation, but when everybody started having babies and that took up a lot of time, then we're forced to reassess, okay, well, we haven't done a Beltane Maypole ritual or anything in a few years. So now everything is, we do it through Zoom, or not Zoom, like Facebook video. So the transition was more in how we're going to do it,
Mm-hmm.
And then even more recently than that, again, not because of the pandemic, but with everything changing kind of in our lives. And I will say that in the last 10 months, I've had 3 miscarriages, which really forced me not necessarily to look at my beliefs or my ideologies, but it kind of forced me to reassess how magic works. Because leading up to my first pregnancy, we did some fertility magic and it seemed to work. I seemed to figure out a good way to make things happen that I wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that first instance was like, okay, so this is a ritual I have never done in my life, because why would I have needed to?
Right.
And it kind of forced me to reassess, not the what necessarily, but like how we're making the magic happen.
Right.
What to do, because everybody has a million different ideas for how to do one fertility ritual. But it's like, what ingredients and how do I know that this particular crystal or this particular oil is what is going to do the thing? You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So it was kind of challenging in my own brain. Is this how magic works? Because leading up to being more adult, getting married and having children, we weren't doing substantial rituals. We would do some basic healings, and I can do Reiki for this person, and we can do we can clear some energy out of your house, but nothing really big.
Right.
What I would call big. So getting into the fertility rituals and then having to do the miscarriage purging, I guess, purging all that muck. That really challenged for me how magic works. And there was actually a quote from, what's the book? I can see it. The Mysteries of Druidry. I actually pulled it up just to read it. I saved it on my phone. So I actually read this book maybe 2 years ago. And the quote is, consider a type of magic that sorcerers and shamans have done for thousands of years, a ritual for rain. Nobody who does this kind of magic claims that a successful ritual makes rain fall miraculously out of a clear blue sky. Instead, the barometric pressure drops, the wind shifts, clouds roll in, and rain starts to fall in the normal way. So it looks just like a normal rainstorm. So that kind of stuck with me. I saved it on my phone because when we do a spell or a ritual, if I'm doing a fertility spell or if I'm doing a healing for myself, because God knows I needed it, I think we have this preconceived notion that magic happens fairly quickly. You do the spell, you do the ritual, and it's going to happen. It's going to come, it's going to work really quickly. And I'm starting to think that's not the case. After my first miscarriage, one of the girls came over. We did a hardcore healing, like spiritual cleaning. I had all the herbs. We had the candles. She did some rune magic. We did some Reiki. It was like intense.
Right.
And I felt really good about it. We worked it in that I would have a healthy second pregnancy. I wouldn't have any more losses. I got pregnant right away. And I'm like, this is good. I got pregnant right away. And then I had another miscarriage. And then I got pregnant right away again. And then I had another miscarriage. So after 3, and now we're in a pandemic, I'm really just like, what is even magic anymore? What even is any of this stuff?
Right.
You know, did my spell back in September last year, did that fail abysmally? Were we not cautious with our phrasing? Or did it work? It's just not meant to right now. Because my husband, and even my therapist brought this up. They're like, if you had carried any of those pregnancies to term, the first one was due the week Massachusetts shut down from the pandemic. Yeah. My second one was due 2 weeks ago. My third one would have been due on Halloween. And my husband was just like, I don't know how to feel about this. I had to give him birth in a hospital, probably by myself.
Yeah.
And how well, like, it, who knows what would have happened. Right. So not to say I'm glad it happened, but it's just looking back and it's like, I need to reassess my entire magical practice because what just happened, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, and I'm certain that my group mates feel similarly.
Right.
Because of all the crazy, just mind-blowing changes that have happened. It's really causing us to reassess not just our practice. It's just how magic works, how these rituals work. They clearly have their own timeline, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, who is up there? Like, you hear me, obviously somebody hears me. What are y'all doing up there? What is happening?
Right.
So
in thinking about this, and clearly this wasn't that long ago that all this is occurring for you, how is this reevaluating and this contemplating and sort of dissecting how magic works and how your spell crafting and casting is working and the whole dynamic of it all? How is that manifesting in your practice now? If you're not quite settled, or are you settled? Have you worked all this out?
No, we haven't. Partially because the quarantine is keeping us apart, physically apart. And I can definitely say we do our best work when we're together in person. Mm-hmm. So, and my friend has a new baby, and I mean, it's really hectic. So we've kind of put our practice not on hold. It's just on a back burner. It's kind of not in the forefront of our lives because we've just got so much other crap we have to deal with. But like, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I haven't seen my friends since Christmas, and a lot has even happened since then.
Right. So is this encouraging you, or is it motivating you to do things on your own? I know before you had said, you know, you really never had your own personal practice. It's always been with a group. Now, the fact that you you weren't really able to because of all these other circumstances, are you establishing something for yourself so that or are you just sort of taking a sabbatical?
Yeah. Mostly I have now, for the first time ever, built a more solitary practice because I kind of have to if I want to do magic. It's either, I mean, there is a little bit of that sabbatical. Actually, no, actually, I lied to you. I saw my girlfriends in February. We did what do you call it? Not a cord cutting, but
Like a severing or a releasing or a
yeah,
banishing?
releasing. So that's the last time we worked magic together, and that was great. I think that worked, and that was another thing that I could bring up as to like what constitutes the magic working.
Right.
But yeah, so I've now kind of set up sort of a solitary practice. I actually just maybe a month ago we redid my altar space in our living room, so it now fits my aesthetic now, and I think that would be um, part of the reason why I even kind of got through some of the stagnation at all is because we did kind of like a cleaning project, like a magical cleaning, where we took everything out, cleaned everything, like wiped down the statues, washed the crystals, and put the new furniture in, which is like super antique furniture. And then we rebuilt it. So now I look at it, I'm like, okay, now I feel like I could sit here and do a spell. Whereas before it was a rickety table that couldn't fit everything.
Yeah.
Now I feel like the energy is flowing, everything feels fresh and clean, and now I'm ready,
Right.
So that helped. But for now, I'm not doing rituals or spells right now. I've decided, well, quarantine screwed me up in that it kind of made my anxiety worse, like really bad. I feel like before I go back into doing any spells or rituals, even if I'm doing them by myself, which I'm totally comfortable with, I just prefer to be with my girls. I kind of want to take this opportunity to kind of go through my books, take some time to read and maybe, like I said, reassess my feelings on how spells and rituals and magic work. This is kind of like taking some me time to really figure some shit out.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense. I mean, even you've had such a full magical life, full of working with your girls, and really, I mean, I know because I know you what a lot of your stuff consisted of, and you share it clearly on the channel. Taking a moment to reassess can really shift the energy of what your magic is going to be, and it makes perfect sense, considering the people that you practice with, you're not able to be in person. So if you were to look at what you were practicing before, understand what you've been going through with how the rituals seem to have worked, only to end as they did, what big changes, if any, do you think are going to, or can you even fathom what changes might occur for you after like reassessing and trying to reestablish your beliefs and your understandings of magic and the craft and stuff? Do you see any big changes, or do you think they're going to be just a slight shift for you?
If I had to guess, now we're 4 months into the quarantine, right? I've lost all track of time.
Yeah.
But I really think that for me, they're going to be gradual, big changes. I know that, okay, so the time that I've had at home, like I was furloughed for about a month at the start because I had just had my miscarriage, so I had to be home. And then my hours have been cut so severely that I'm home all the time now. So I have kind of said, you need to do something with this time and make something with it. So my goal has been to kind of do, I don't know what you would call it. I would call it kind of like spirit work, shadow work, kind of not forcing myself, but really pushing myself and encouraging myself to do like the really deep rooted work. Like I can do any kind of spell at, oh, I have these crystals and these candles, I can do that. But I really want to kind of get to the root of any, or I guess of my power. Everybody has power. I want to kind of re-examine mine. Mm-hmm. I've had many readings from friends and colleagues over the last couple of years, and they seem to think that you need to be doing XYZ for work and you have a lot of untapped potential there. And I'm like, I'm sure you're right. I just don't know what to do or how to do it. So I've taken this time to focus on those things.
Yeah.
Like when I have some sort of premonition, well, I want to be able to know what to do with that information. I want to be able to know how to go through and access that information on a deeper level. So that's what I'm doing. So I think, like I said, it's going to be over time making these gradual, bigger changes to really probably make my craft is probably going to do a 180.
Yeah.
Totally get flipped around.
And that makes sense. I mean, hearing you talk about, the pregnancies ending in miscarriages, and then the looking at why that would be, was it timing? Was it God's intervention for your best interest? Was it internal stuff happening? Was it a combination of everything? And I think I would agree. I mean, with your idea of taking the time to do some deep seated shadow work, whatever you want to call it, I think it's only gonna improve and empower you even more for when the time is right for everything. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So right now, I mean, so what is your typical day right now? I mean, you said you're home for a lot of the time, and you are, books and studying. And so what would your typical sort of magical sort of day be for you right now?
Yeah. They're all different. It depends on how I'm feeling. A typical day would be, I like to sit in my altar space and just to sit in it. We have like bones and feathers and things. I just like to be in that space. It makes me happy. Yeah. And I feel like it's almost like everybody has, even non-magical people have their own daily rituals. They sit with a cup of coffee and flip through Facebook. Mine is kind of recharging my batteries in my altar space. Yeah. I do light incense just about every day, and I walk it through the house, or I grow my own herbs actually. So I have freshly dried herbs that I burn, and I waft it through the house. I have it looks like something you'd find in a Catholic church. It's a little copper thing with a handle, and I would wave it around, and the smoke would go everywhere. So even though I'm not like trying to cleanse the house like that in a ritualistic way, I'm still going through the house and kind of intentionally kind of doing the little mantras in my head, like refreshing the space and making it smell nice. And if it smells nice and everybody's uplifted, doing little things like that. I've been keeping my garden. Like I said, I have a herb garden that I keep, and I have to find it, but I have a scythe, like those druidic knives, and you have to use that to harvest the herbs. So there's a little bit of ritual in that, So it's little things like that. And then I'd lay in bed or lay on the couch or sit in my space and read a book. I was getting back into magical journaling. Like I've got my massive leather tome. But that's like, you need a whole day. Like you need to okay, I'm ready for this. Get yourself in. You can't just sit down and write a few lines. Like you have to dedicate your day to this book.
Yeah.
So I've been doing little things like that. Yeah.
So advice for other individuals, other witches that might be going through some sort of transition or a time of introspection or going through, you know, the big questions like, how is my magic working? I thought it was working this way, and it seems like maybe that's not the way it actually works for me.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for others that might be experiencing a similar thing?
I actually did a video about this, so I'll try not to talk about the same things. But I would say that if people are experiencing stagnation, or like they're feeling drawn to make these changes, I think that they need to listen to that. Even stagnation, even if you're like, oh, I'm not feeling spiritual, I don't feel like doing any of this, listen to that feeling. And I don't think there's anything wrong with needing to step away for a little while, because just because you're not doing magic, that doesn't mean you're not a witch. That doesn't mean suddenly, like, well, you're supposed to do it every day. Like, no. Who said that? Like, you know, everybody needs to take a break from any work, because it is work. You know, a lot of people spend a lot of time and energy doing that sort of thing. So if they're feeling like they need to step aside, either reassess or just take a break from it, I think that's completely valid. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, especially right now we're in a global pandemic. Listen to yourself, and then if it's stagnation or a transition or both, for me it's a little bit of both, take the time to explore why. I found that was really helpful, because before I was like, I haven't done any sort of ritual in weeks. I felt bad about it, but then I'm like, you know what? I think I needed to take that break, you know? And that has allowed me to kind of figure out a new system, reading, taking things a little slower, reassessing my feelings. So that would be my advice, because it's actually been working really well for me. I don't feel like I'm pressuring myself. I don't have any goals. I'm not saying, okay, by New Year's, I have to have established a new practice. I have to have established a new routine or no. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Don't set any deadlines for yourself. Just kind of let it organically happen.
Mm-hmm.
That I would say I would leave it at that, because I could say meditate on it, but not everybody meditates. I could say, you know, I would say I would leave it at that.
Yeah. It sounds like good advice to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, thank you for talking with me and going and sharing your experiences with me and everyone who might be watching the video. I'm sure someone will definitely gain some advice and help through this. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I had to get serious, but, you know, sometimes life is serious.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, right? And as I said in the beginning, her information will be in the information section of the video. So go check her out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. And keep an eye on the channel for, I believe there's going to be a couple of more videos in this series. So stay tuned. And thank you all for watching. Thank you, Bettina. I love you all. Blessed be everyone.
Thank you all for listening.